I am so pleased to have our next guest in studio. He is the Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development. Now, that's a long title, and it might sound a little boring to some folks, but you know what that means? That means money coming into our state, money coming into our communities, money to develop the communities and to make them better and to help them grow. And that's good for everyone. His name is Stuart McWhorter, and he joins us in studio to talk about all the exciting things that are happening in the state of Tennessee.
Thanks, Matt.
Hey, Stuart, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
It was good to see you the other night.
Yeah, that was fun.
We were joking around before we came on air. You got to be at the big kids table with Senator Blackburn and everybody else. I was over in the corner over there.
Well, sometimes it helps to just know people, and maybe they had some folks that couldn't go that night, and they said, "Hey, you want to move up to the big kids table?"
I like that. Stuart McWhorter just said he was a seat filler at the Davidson County GOP.
Well, I had to, like I was telling you, I had to keep an eye on Clay Travis. You just sometimes
that's a difficult task.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So for the unwashed masses, and I include myself in that number. The Commissioner of the Department of Economic and Community Development. What do you do every day?
Well, it's an honor to serve. Really, at the end of the day, I'm basically running our sales team for the state. Mm-hmm. My team and I lead the state's marketing and recruiting for businesses and industry to the state, or help them expand their operations. So we're representing the Tennessee brand. And it's a business, really. I mean, we are out there just telling all the reasons why Tennessee is a great place to do business. And we work with CEOs in the C-suite and consultants that represent these companies to try to, make it an easy transition, because they're making, significant investments in our state. So we want it to be a good experience for them. And that's what our role really is, to represent the brand. My boss is the governor, mm-hmm. and I take orders from him in terms of what we want to focus on and what industry we want to focus on. And so that's what we do. And then the other piece that gets a lot of headlines, but another piece of what we do is support our local rural communities. We have some programming in our department where we go in and work with these small towns, rural towns that, are growing. We had 90 out of 95 counties last year with population growth. So you're starting to see a lot of fantastic things happening. And so we're there to support those communities through some state grants that we manage. And then there's some federal grants that they sometimes utilize through us with the state matching. So it's a lot of work, but it's great work and rewarding. And you can actually see the results immediately. So that's what I love about what I do.
What are priorities from headquarters then? I mean, what are kind of your priorities right now as we sit here today?
Well, when the governor went into office back in 2019, I think it was his first executive order was to focus on rural Tennessee. He wanted to get, at that time we had 15 distressed counties. It's a federal designation, a formula that's utilized across all the entire country. We had 15 counties in that distressed category. We have whittled our way down to 8. Mm-hmm. And the governor was very focused on bringing jobs, bringing economic prosperity to those communities that hadn't seen it in some cases ever. So that's been our focus really over the last 6.5 years. But, we're a heavy automotive state. We have soon to be 4 OEMs. And as you know, there's a lot of headwinds right now in the automotive industry, whether it's just the adoption of EVs or whether it's the threat of tariffs and how that impacts the industry. But we're still very interested and certainly supportive of the industry here. It's a lot of jobs. There's over 1,000 automotive companies in our state, and it's a big piece of what we do. But as you and I were talking earlier, we're focused, as we grow as a state, we're focused on how we can continue to support TVA and the need for more power and the need to mm-hmm. generate additional power. So the governor's a big believer in nuclear. We've got some programs in place and some funding in place to help support the ecosystem in nuclear right now. Because that touches everything that we do. I mean, everybody needs power to do the things that they're doing, and we can talk more about that. But we're very diverse. But ultimately, at the end of the day, our job is to support the communities and to really bring in quality global brands that are bringing new jobs to our state.
I mean, so you're everywhere. You're all across the state of Tennessee.
Absolutely.
I would expect that if you could change anything about the state, you would make it less long, a little more girthy.
Maybe.
Is that a fair statement?
It's long.
I mean, my favorite, and my loyal listeners are sick to death of me giving this statistic out, but my favorite statistic that I learned when I moved to Tennessee in 2021 was, and you can fact check me on this,
All right.
that it is further from Memphis to Bristol than it is from Bristol to Canada.
I think that
is absolutely a fact.
Yeah.
And if you put it in that and now obviously you're going to the Great Lakes,
Sure.
but that's neither here nor there. But still, when you put it in those that kind of stuff, wow, that's a long
puts it
state.
in context,
right?
Yeah, it is. It really is.
And you mentioned the rural communities, and it's been a fascination of mine for a long, long time. I'm a motorcycle rider, so I try to get off on the back roads, right?
Yeah.
And I've done so in the state of Tennessee. And much like my home state of Georgia, much like the state that I lived in for so many years, Alabama, you see those smaller communities. And I understand the world changes. Interstate system changed a lot of things about how we live.
Right.
And it has to be a delicate balance to let the natural free market do what it's going to do versus trying to protect some of those local just gems and jewels that we have around the state of Tennessee that deserve a certain level of love and care.
That's right. Well, again, the governor is very good about the balance that we as a department, and we work with our other sister agencies really well along these lines because, the governor in his State of the State talked about the loss of farmland across the state. We as a department, we're not going out talking to farmers about selling their property to create industry. This is, we work with communities who tell us, hey, we've identified industrial sites that we believe make sense for our community. And we work with businesses to figure out where they want to go. But, Tennessee, is a beautiful state and, across the entire state. And the preservation of farmland, the preservation of these small towns, these small courthouse, roundabouts.
Oh, yeah, man.
And what we're actually seeing is more retail sort of reviving in those small communities because these smaller communities, as I was mentioning, they're seeing population growth and people want to shop, spend their money and time on these small town squares. And that's what we want to see, and that's what we want to try to support. And the governor obviously is very supportive and wants to see more of that. And we've got so much opportunity to continue that right now.
It occurs to me that you probably get a little pushback on some of the development too, right?
Of course, yeah.
I would expect that. And that's the balance that you and I'm sure the governor try to achieve, where you want to bring in business, you want to bring in opportunity, you want to bring in residential property, then commercial development.
That's right.
But you also want to respect the desires of the communities that you're trying to serve.
And we put a lot of emphasis in our local partnerships. So we work with every county mayor, every city mayor, every chamber of commerce, and every one of these counties that are in our state, because we want to know from them. Tell us however you define economic development is what we want to help you with, and they're all different. We don't prescribe anything to any of them because that's a recipe for disaster. We're not going to ever do that. We listen closely to them. We have a really good relationship with all the mayors across the state, and they'll tell you, they're not ashamed to tell you what they want. And they have the data and the reasons to support that. And then we take that in, and as we talk to industry, we try to match that up that makes the most sense.
I'm not the smartest guy around, Stuart, and Stuart McWhorter is our guest. He is the head of economic and community development in the state of Tennessee. I'm not the smartest guy around, but I would think that as you are talking to business and industry around the country and around the world, at one of the maybe on the top of the calling card in terms of why Tennessee, obviously the topography, the state itself, et cetera, but a lack of income tax, I would think, would be a big deal for business, because that is almost an automatic, if they have a price point that they want to pay their employees, that's an automatic raise for those employees in the state of Tennessee.
100%. Yeah. No income tax is a big selling point for us. And we're thankful to have that. We're thankful that our legislature and the governor support that. We also are it's a great place to live, the cost of living. You get a raise with no income tax. In many cases, you get a raise when you buy a home here, or, you move your family here. But we just, as you probably know, we last session cut our franchise tax. So again, another business tax cut that went to, a lot of the businesses, particularly small businesses. That was, another gain for them, another win for them as well. But we have, whether it's workforce, which is huge, the governor says this pretty much everywhere he goes, particularly when he's with us, is the states with the workers are the ones that will win. So we've emphasized a lot of technical training. We've invested over $1 billion in our TCAT technical school system. We support a lot of the four-year institutions. We have great research development partners across the state that are not only doing the research development, but they're training the future workforce as well. And that's huge for us. And, we're attracting people to our state. We have a lot of migration to the state, but we're also, I say we, higher ed, all of our education partners are doing everything they can to, keep their students once they graduate, keep them in Tennessee. We want them to stay and work and live and raise their family in our state.
Before we get to specific, I'm curious, if some of the calling card features are, the price and cost of living and lack of income. I mean, what are some things that you hear that are challenges for businesses, if anything?
Well, I mean, just as much as it's an opportunity to have a workforce, that's going to always be a challenge. You're never going to get to where you want to with workforce, because as we grow as a state and jobs change, we're always going to be looking for that next level of talent, and which is why we're investing what we are. But I think that if we aren't addressing the power requirement, the power needs that we continue to see in our business in economic development, we're going to see other states do things way ahead of us. And what I mean by that is, most of these companies that we work with are in the manufacturing, in some form of manufacturing, and they're investing just an enormous amount of capital into automation and advanced manufacturing. That requires, that's power.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And, we're getting a lot of headlines with data centers and all what's going on with AI, and that's real. And TVA is our power partner in our state. They're work with 7 other states, but Tennessee is clearly the state that TVA
kind of
covers.
The epicenter of that.
It's
right?
it. And, it's a federal agency. I don't think a lot of people know.
I didn't know that until 20 minutes ago.
Yeah. And the president and Congress, they basically appoint and hire the CEO and the board of directors. And it's got what we call a debt limit, a cap on how much they can borrow. And I believe it hasn't been raised in decades. You think about the cost of doing business over the last several decades, and they have not raised their debt limit to be able to invest in things. So, I don't know what the answer is, except to say we got to pound the drum on that and say, hey, if TVA is going to be able to generate and transmit additional power, whether that's through natural gas or we all believe the future is nuclear and new nuclear, they have to have access to capital and make these investments that are going to be key. And I'm talking hundreds of billions of dollars of investment that's going to be required to get there. I'm
curious how, and I know we have to take a break, Chris, but I'm curious how when you sit down and talk to TVA, are you doing that as a coalition of states? Do you do it independent of the other states that are involved? How does it work?
Yeah, it's a coalition of states. The governor has convened other governors in states that TVA has a presence. There's conversations with both Senator Blackburn and Senator Haggerty, as well as Chuck Fleischman. He's just been a phenomenal advocate for what we're talking about and for our department. But yeah, I mean, it's not just about Tennessee; it's about the region. It's about the valley, and there's a sense of urgency there. We really need to be, escalating the conversation and figuring out what we're going to be able to do.
Are we currently leading in the nuclear space?
Well, we have
in
Oak
this
Ridge.
Region.
Yeah, Oak Ridge National Labs. You talk about Manhattan Project 1.
Right.
Yeah. We have so much capability and opportunity in that realm. So that's why I think it's so important to be moving on this rapidly.
On the subject of nuclear energy, and the future seems to be, and you tell me if we're advancing the case for, and you told me what is small modular, right?
Yeah, small modular reactor, SMR.
And these are, it's different, sadly, nuclear energy still has this this perception around it of 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl,
right.
These types of things when I was a kid. It's just not that way anymore.
Right. Yeah. We call it new nuclear.
Right.
And the advancements in new nuclear technology is such that, you really don't have that risk anymore. It's clean. It's powerful. You can put these SMRs out and produce, an enormous amount of power. They're modular, so they're not these massive, as you would think, growing up.
With the steam stacks and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, these big nuclear plants that they're fenced off. You can't even look at it. Or
you see it way from the distance. Right.
Yeah, that's all changing as we sit here. It's expensive and it takes time. We're hoping that over time it becomes less expensive. You can get these implemented and up and running, much more rapidly than you can today. The bridge, as they say, to nuclear is going to be natural gas, and TVA is doing a lot of that now. We're working on a lot of projects where natural gas is going to be the power source. The coal plants, although many are shutting down, I think people are realizing that they have to slow their roll on that, and because that is a significant component to nuclear. But that to us is really what the future is. The other, whether it's solar or wind, that contributes to the grid. But that's really for us, as you talk about, gigawatts of power, which is a lot of power. It's nuclear is really going to be the long-term solution of that.
I don't want to limit you just to the Nashville community, but I would humbly suggest that it has to be one of the bigger economic development projects and opportunities in the state of Tennessee right now, what we're seeing on the East Bank. Would I be right?
No, you're right. It's exciting to see, that coming together with the new stadium, starting. We've got Oracle building, which is going to be, their world headquarters.
Right.
Their Oracle's engagement with our healthcare community. I don't think a lot of people really understand or realize the significance of that. What that will look like in the next 20, 30 years is going to be, a game changer in healthcare. But all the development from where Oracle will be all the way down, to that scrapyard we were talking about, and, whatever goes there. You think about what's happening in Broadway, whether it's the honky tonks and the nightlife, but in tourism, but really companies choosing to call Nashville home. That will be happening over there on East Bank for the next, 50 years. And it's going to be, it'll be, well, I don't know if I'll be here 50 years from now, but along the way, it'll be interesting to watch. Now, the flip side is, it's like, what's that going to look like from
traffic standpoint,
housing,
sure,
all of that stuff, and but it's thoughtfully planned. I think that Mayor O'Connell and his team are being as thoughtful as they can about how that comes together, and we actually have a really good partnership with the mayor, and talking through and being thoughtful about the types of businesses that ought to go down there, and the workforce that could be available for those companies. So I'm excited about it.
One question that we had over on the super text line, and you can get it in 615-737-9986. How would you, over the last 5 years, you were with the governor's team during COVID-19?
I was.
And it was it was craziness, and we don't have to revisit the insanity that was COVID-19 all across the country, all across the world. How are businesses now? Do you feel like we're getting back to normal?
Yeah, so it was an interesting time. I was Commissioner of Finance and Administration, and the governor asked me to head up our COVID response. We called it Unified Command. And under the governor's leadership, I think, it was tough. I mean, nobody knew what this disease was and how it was impacting lives and businesses and families, all of those things. But the governor was very thoughtful about deeming companies essential, essential for business, essential products and goods that were essential for day-to-day lives. And, was a lot of states shut those down. And in Tennessee, the governor led in that and felt like, we got to keep these businesses. We got to give them enough latitude to make decisions what they think is best for their companies. We don't need to be telling these businesses what they can and can't do. And yes, they were impacted, but because of that, as a state, we came out of the pandemic better than most states. And I think we've realized the results of that over the last, couple of years post-pandemic because of all the things that are happening in our state. And a lot of southern states have seen the same sort of results as well. I mean, many of them were managed the same way, those that border us, which I think is part of the reason why I think the Southeast has really grown population-wise, economic development-wise. Other states that border us, we compete with, but we also see the benefits of their success in our state as well. And I think a lot of that most recently was because of how COVID was managed at the state level.
I don't begin to understand the business of what you do in terms of meeting with various businesses, working with those businesses, and showing what an attractive location Tennessee is. But how do you balance that? And obviously, many of these companies want to see, an incentive package.
Right.
They want to know, hey, what are you bringing to the table if we bring this opportunity to the state,
right,
for employment and all that? How do you balance that against the businesses that are already here? And it's been a longstanding interest of mine that, you want to protect those businesses that have had a longstanding relationship with the state. At the same time, you need to offer some incentives for these other businesses to come in.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And again, we work closely with these communities and talk to the business leaders of the chambers to, have these types of discussions. One thing that probably needs to be said is that on our business development side of the house, we do projects like that. 70% of our incentives are to companies that are already here expanding. So they've made a commitment.
Yeah.
They're not coming in from, some other place.
Mm-hmm.
So we're working with those that are already seeing success and they want to grow and add more employees, make more capital investment in our state, in these communities. But I think how we address those that are already here, that aren't needing additional grant dollars for expansion, but how we support them are through the other programming that happens around the state, particularly with whether it's TDOT investing in new roads, highways and roads, or whether it's, the governor investing more in workforce development with our technical schools in these communities, because those existing businesses need access to the workforce. They want the right training, their new equipment in those TCATs to train up their workforce, whether they're existing or they're thinking about adding, additional staff. So there's other things that we do as a state to support those folks as well. It may not be a direct grant from us. Our focus is net new jobs. But when we're talking to businesses, they're saying, hey, you probably can't do anything with us through your programming, but we'd love to see, it could be a variety of things where the state can lean in and say, hey, we hear what you're saying. We're going to try to address this challenge, this issue, or this opportunity. And that's, I think, the beauty of the governor has 20 departments and commissioners like myself that all work really, really well together. And I think that's a reflection of his business background and understanding how things really work and lead and run the state as if it is sort of that business perspective. And that's made all the difference, I think, for us.
One of our super texters writes in and wanted to know specifically what's happening with the Ford plant in West Tennessee. And I'll kind of expand the question and ask you, what is the role of your office after we see some businesses come in terms of, helping them, in any way that you can?
Sure. Yeah. So, Ford and Blue Oval City is a massive investment in West Tennessee with Ford and SK battery. Now, the SK side is they're still on track production for the battery because they have such a large reach across, the entire country in North America. Ford's delayed the rollout and production of the Ford electric truck. Look, I mean, it's a business decision that Ford has to make. They're not the only ones. All the automotive, OEMs are dealing with, a variety of challenges right now. I think for us, we just want to be supportive as we can with the companies. They've got, outside of the project itself, in these communities, they're talking about workforce and housing. So we're trying to address those housing needs. May not be through our department, but the state is. Or we're talking about infrastructure, water, wastewater, roads, the infrastructure you need, power, and it's in some way it's a blessing, particularly in Blue Oval City, because it's such a massive investment and a lot of employees that the pause on the Ford side is actually, or the delay, is actually allowing these communities to catch up because it's requiring a lot of a variety of things to make sure that these communities are prepared for what's about to happen in West Tennessee. And it's going to impact not just the 2 or 3 counties that, are right there at the ground zero. I mean, it's going to affect all of West Tennessee and, quite frankly, all of Tennessee.
And someone says to me that it's called DT Energy, not Ford. I was just reading I did not know that. I apologize. I'm just reading the question as it's written. Create this is good. I love my listeners. Can you ask Stuart to create a Tennessee Department of Pothole Fixing?
Well,
that's probably not necessarily your direct line of area of expertise.
Maybe TDOT could come up with some creative program there.
I did a deep dive on potholes in Tennessee, and people don't understand that the asphalt that's used in Michigan and the asphalt that is used in Florida, They're completely different mixes and completely different blends based on the climate. And in Tennessee, man, the climate is just right there at that strange zone where it gets cold enough and it gets hot enough, and so.
Well, maybe that's an opportunity for entrepreneurs in our state to come up with, let's be the Tennessee mix,
right?
Come up with our own recipe.
So what's next? What's on your plate that you're excited about? Anything come to mind?
Well, look, we've got a year and a half or so left of the governor's second term. And, he's challenged our department and other departments to think boldly, think innovatively, so we're taking on the challenge. We want to, oftentimes you have elected officials finishing out as, sort of a lame duck, but I know Governor Lee wants to finish strong and leave us, a legacy, and more importantly, hand off to the next administration, the next governor, some, great product that's just humming along. And that's what we're really focused on. So, I'm excited about, we're maybe a few weeks out from, session ended with the General Assembly. I heard it was quite,
we'll get into that next hour. It was adventurous today, to say the least. So once that wraps up, we'll be preparing for next year and the final year of the governor's second term. Does that surprise you? I mean, just on a personal level, you mentioned to me, I guess it was off air, that the governor asked you to be a part of his team, and now you can see the finish line.
I know, it's crazy.
At least for his term.
Yeah,
right?
It's just gone by so fast, and he was. There's no question in my mind the right person for the job, given all the things that the state has gone through, COVID, the first lady with her battle with cancer, and she's doing fantastic. I saw her this morning. But, the guy's just been through a lot in his life, and God prepared him for this moment in time. And, Tennessee is very fortunate to have Bill Lee. I mean, he didn't have to do this, but he was called to do it, and he's led well, and he wants to finish strong. And I'm excited, about these coming, months ahead to finish strong with him and hand this off and keep on going.